Now I'm going to talk about role-based authorization, maybe the simplest way of doing the authorization. And the authorization itself means to check what kind of permissions users have. And the basic model, role-based model, says that we have some roles. For example, we can have admin, I don't know, viewer, or editor, etc. And we can define them, of course, based on our needs. And we have these roles and we assign them to users. For example, we say user ID equal 1 has role admin and as well as editor. That's totally fine. They can have different roles at the same time. And this is not enough. There's another concept here as well. So we call them actions. So we can have different actions. For example, based on my need, my application and functionalities, I want to have the following action. For example, create, delete, like CRUD jobs, let's say, read and update. And then we can have something called policy in between, actually. So I can remove this and make another box to point it somewhere else, like this, maybe. And then also this one can be connected to this. So we call them policy. And this policy will be a map between roles and actions. For example, admin can perform create, delete, read, update. Another example, for example, maybe a simple user, let's say viewer user can only read the documents or perform the read action, let's say. And this is the concept of policy. And then now we have this user roles mapping. For example, user ID 1 has the role admin. It means that they can, based on this policy mapping, they can perform all the actions. And as well as editor, or if they only have let's say view or actually role viewer, yes, they can only, based on this mapping, these rules that we have defined here, they can also only perform read action from the list. But this is the whole idea of authorization, but we have to somehow implement the whole entire thing by ourselves. We have to create a database of roles, policy, actions. Then we have to create another user role mapping database, etc. So again, it needs a lot of effort and hard to implement somehow. But the good news is that there are third-party services that you can use. For this video, I'm going to use permit.io. So they have different services such as RBAC, which is the thing that I just explained, as well as RBAC, which is relational based access control. So RBAC means role based access control. And the idea here is to make roles, policies, actions, and map them to our users. And eventually they have a great API. We can use that API in our application in order to make the policies, maybe map the users to roles. But I'm not going to cover that part, but instead I'm going to cover only one functionality that they give us, which is checking their permissions. Let me explain first how it works. I'm in the app.permit.io. Then I go to the policy section. I define a resource, and then I click this create resource. I call the resource name, for example, manage blocks. Then it will have a key. Later we can use this key in our codes. Somehow we have to hard code them. But for manage block, we are just creating a resource. Later I will explain what is that. And we can perform these kind of actions here: read, create, update, delete, etc. And then I'm going to save it. Now that we have this resource, let's say what kind of roles can have access to this resource. So I go to the roles, and from here, as you can see, we have some different roles already created. You can remove them or add your own resources. For example, I have created Salesforce resource here manually. I can get rid of it because we don't need it. But for now, we have this editor, admin, viewer. Those are fine. Let me go back to the policy now, or policy editor tab. And in here, as you can see, for our resource, which is manage block, we have for each one of these roles, we have this form that I can check. For example, admin can, for the manage block resource, can create, delete, read, update. Simply perform all the actions. Editor can create, read, and update, but not delete the manage block resource. And for viewer, they can only read. And now this is this part of this diagram, and maybe also the role actually. And now we have to map our users with roles. And to do so, again, we can go back here to the directory tab this time in the permit.io, and I can manually create users. Now, of course, in the real world, we don't do it manually. I don't come here and click add users because we want to have it dynamic, and maybe we have millions of users and we have to automate this. And actually, in the real world, as soon as a user tries to log in or sign up for the first time, we have to create a user by calling the permit.io, in this case, APIs, and create a user and assign some default roles to them. But for now, I'm not going to implement that part, and I can manually create the user here. So let me create add user. And this add user, you need a unique ID. And since I have logged in or signed up already in the Firebase, my users are here in the Authentication tab. And the users, you can see the user ID here. I can grab it and I can paste it here as the user key. And then if I scroll down in the top level access, I can specify all the roles that this user can have. For example, this user is only a viewer. So let's save it. And we are good. So we have created the mapping between the users and roles. Now it's the time to go to the Next.js application and write some logics in order to let the users perform some actions. For example, if I go to the project, so in the dashboard, imagine I have a like panel or something here in the sidebar that we are going to show a blog form that users can go there, actually admins, and maybe write some post or publish something. So I'm going to create something. Welcome to dashboard. Let's say I'm going to, for now, I can go with a simple button or a simple, let's say, link. And I can point it to somewhere like create post like this. And then I have to close it. Close the link, actually, like this. I can put a name on it. Let me import. And now I should have a create post page somewhere on my page. Maybe I can also create it here at inside the dashboard. But in this case, its route is going to be dashboard/create post. Let me make the folder. Create post.tsx. Actually create post/page.tsx. Now I can explore something. And now we are good here. From here, first of all, I can conditionally render it based on the active user role. And if you remember from the previous video, we stored the user ID here in the headers in the middleware. So if I go back to the middleware, you can see X user ID contains the logged in user. If I go back here, I can grab the user ID. And now if I can perform a check here by sending this user ID to permit.io APIs. And then I can check if the users has access to this page or not. Let's do it. If I go back to the app.permit.io, in the connect section, you can see some examples. For our case, it is Node.js. If I scroll down, they say that you have to install permit.io. Let's do it. So npm install permit.io. Now it's installed. And if I scroll down a little, there's a small code here. You can see I can create an instance of permit. I can actually create it at some place and export it. Let's do it. So if I go back to here, maybe I can make a folder, services, my mistake. So again, inside app_services, then permit service.ts. I can write and export const permit. It sounds good. I have to import it from permit.io. Yes. And here, as you can see, we have to like specify the path of the permit.io. Since we are using the cloud version, we have to specify this path. You can of course put them inside the environment variable, as well as your token that you can grab it from the settings, and then API keys. And since we are in the development mode, I'm using this development area or environment. I can grab the API key from here by pressing this reveal key and then copying it. I've already done this. Later I'm going to remove it. So that's it from this part. Now it's time to use this permit.io. By the way, it's good to mark this file as use server to prevent it to be somehow by mistake be sent to the clients. So let's grab this permit in our page. So permit.check, and I have to actually import it, permit.check. It has a function called check, and we have to send a user ID and then the action, and then at the third part we have to specify the resource. For our case, user ID is here as the first parameter, and the action that we want to do is to read, and the third part is the resource that we try to access. So let's go back, and I need a recall to see what was the resource name. Yeah, in our case, in the policy editor, it was managing block or manage block. Let's see manage block, and it's gonna be, let's see, it's checking if the user is actually exists or not. We are sure that it doesn't exist. It is a bad practice that you put an exclamation mark here, but for now, since I'm sure that we have this user ID, let's go with that. And then it's going to be a promise. I have to await it like this, await, and then the result would be a boolean. So I can say const has access like this, and then using this constant we can conditionally render the stuff here. So I can say if they have access, and then you are free to render this page or this link. Of course, I can manually put this in their URL. The same check I can perform in the create post page by simply copying the whole logic here. I can put it here as well. Let me also import these, and then I don't need this email. And here, instead of showing something or not showing something, if they don't have access to this page, we can just simply redirect them to some other place. Maybe, I don't know, to the dashboard or whatever you prefer. And then we are going to, let me import this from the next navigation. Yes, from the next navigation, and this one also I have to go one level up. Looks good now. Let's try it. I just changed the environment to VS Code because I had a problem on my cursor. So let's try it and run dev. And then if I go back here in the dashboard, I'm getting this error because use server is used somewhere. So that should not be okay. Let me go inside this, and it's not an async function. Actually, there's no async function here. It's a simple object export, so I don't need that one. So I can go back, and yeah, as you can see, I have this the access to create a new post. And because if we log the output of this, we can see that we have access to read the to perform the read action on the manage blocks. But let's go back to the permit.io and do some changes and see if it works. For example, my user, since this is a viewer, can this user perform the deletion access? And the answer should be false. So let's say the action is delete, and now let's refresh, and the access is false. So if I go back to the app, let me close this. So here you see I cannot see the page, the link to the page, and also if I try to manually go to the create post, I guess there's no user ID, and the reason is correct because the user ID doesn't exist in this page because my middleware is only catching the dashboard itself. So there's a matcher here. I have to fix it. Dashboard and any subsequent path like this. Let's try it and run it again. Refresh. Yeah. Now if I go to create post, it's redirecting me to the dashboard itself. But if I try to give access to this user, I can simply edit the roles of this user by adding admin and save. And if I try to go back to the create post, this time I should be able to see it. I think that's enough from the authorization. So basically what we can do in order to have authorization, we simply in our page make a request call to this permit.check, and in the background it's going to call an API for us, and by passing this information to their cloud service, they're going to respond us with true or false, a boolean, and then using this we can conditionally perform some actions, or maybe rendering or preventing users to perform an action. And inside the permit.io, which is a service that I have used in this video, you can define users by calling their API or manually create a user, and also you can define different resources, different roles, and different policies, and actually defining policies that maps these resources and roles together. And eventually we can assign the roles to the users to manage the authorization. That was it. I hope you get the idea how to implement authorization in the Next.js application using a third-party library or third-party service like Permit.io. And see you in the next videos.